Good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming today. Um, my name is Martin Rojas, and I am a UI architect for 22 Square. It's an advertising agency. Now, I'm not, like I said, I'm a front-end developer, not a back-end DevOps person, so I have kind of come into DevOps from being dangerous enough to deploy things badly on AWS on the cloud, things that'll probably make you cringe. And as a result of that, it had led me to taking a look and trying out AWS's Simplify service, and that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. Amplify is one of their new tools and services, and their attempt to kind of simplify bringing together and exposing all their services in for those that don't have the know-how as much. At least that's how they're pitching it, right? If you don't have the full deep know-how of how to configure all your AWS services, link them all together, and get deployments on an AC out on there, through there. As a result of that, they've created a lot of packages that connect AWS to each front-end architecture, whether mobile or desktop, and at the same way, a lot of way of managing and connecting all those services in between each other. If you're coming to it and you're seeing it, you're trying to compare it to Netlify, Vercel, some of those SaaS services where you connect your GitHub repo, your code repo, and it will just get your application up and running on the web. Now, it'll have your hosting, your certificate, your CI/CD pipeline, may do some optimizations, may even have some functions or some authentication. Now, Amplify has tied all those together, but what you're really using, you're not using any other services. You're using the full-powered enterprise-grade services. For authentication, you got Cognito. For your data and your APIs, you're using AppSync and API Gateway. As you go through it, they all line up to the services that enterprises are using. And Amplify is sort of a layer on top of that. They have great documentation, so if you're going, you can look at it and really to get you started. And there's really two ways that they have it. They have a CLI tool and an admin. I'll go through quickly through the CLI to kind of show you, because as we go through that, there's one thing that I'm sure will make you run to the hills screaming and being like, yeah, this is never going to work on a real-life environment. So here's just a scripture, just kind of going through it. You npm global install it, you call up the CLI tools, and it'll walk you step by step. So even if you don't know it, if you don't know how to use AWS, it'll get you started, ties up to your browser, make sure you're logged in and connected, and then it walks you through the process of creating a new IAM user. And right up here, it's going to be the thing that will scare any DevOps person in a company, because to use the CLI in this way, it requires, it asks for programmatic access, and then the permissions. To really work, it asks for administrator access, which if you're having developers, you do not want them having administrator access. That's like that makes you kind of go run to the whole screamings. But it configures sets, it sets them back up in your computer, and that is a way. And this is really, if you are a small company or you have your own personal account, this is a great way of going through it, because it makes it really easy to stand up environments, make changes, and move forward. Just so from the theater, if you have your CLI, it really pairs well and really easy to, almost like your Get workflow, how you would go about creating new environments just from the CLI. A little command takes your code, creates a new environment, pushes it, and you got all your environments set up that way. Really easy, really simple. Same thing, after you got in code and you need to use, like in your dev environment, I need a new API. Just hit up add API, it stands up, does all the connections to AppSync, to API Gateway, to Dynamo, creates all of those for you. And then when you merge your code into your next branch, your test branch, your dev branch, all you have to do is push that code, and suddenly all those environments get configured on the next one, entirely different. Easy to create and destroy environments from a command line. In production, same thing. If you have multiple people, they can check out the environments from their own line, and suddenly you're sharing an environment. You got multiple developers working on it. So from that way, it looks really good, and most of the tutorials you'll find will focus on using the CLI tool because it's really powerful and what it can let you do without that. Now, the next piece, and this is really what, to me, made it, to me and to us at 22, really made it be like, okay, this is something we can actually use and scale, is they have created an admin, a UI portal that extrapolates, makes it easier, but at the same time adds a lot of security to it, and that's sort of where we'll go through it here. Again, if you go to AWS, the services, and you create it, you can either connect it to your repo and host an app. So if you need to just build it and go, it's in there. But you can create an app from this way. And this is sort of the method that really, from the beginning, sets it a little bit apart and makes it really great. Here it is starting to create those environments. It's creating the Amplify Studio. It used to be called Admin UI. But what there really is, this is a portal that has its own usernames and passwords separate from in there. So you can be given to multiple developers, content editors, without having to issue them AWS credentials, right? So it creates that little separation of concerns and still lets them create tools just within the context of the application and not going outside of it. As I go in here, it also lets you create like a data schema by a very easy drag and drop. You can configure it, and now all of this is replicated in code and saves as code. This is just a UI layer on top of it that makes it a lot easier for new developers coming in and everybody visually to see how you're creating your data schemas. And same thing, you can add relationships. If you're creating more complex ones, you can create enums and all those things. They have their own validations that line up one-to-one to what AppSync and an API Gateway has. When you click it, it goes through it, provisions all those services, and connects them up and pulls all the right keys that you need to use it. Now here, this is where it ties back into, you still have to have the CLI as a developer connected to the front end. Same thing, to do your authentication, you can create it once for it. You create an entirely new Cognito pool, or if you have an existing one, now tie it into that one. So pools all those things in there together. You want two-factor authentication, it also guides you step by step on using AWS's Pinpoint to create your own 1-800 number for that two-factor SMS of your application. They also have the connections for social logon or other federated ones. So as you can see, really, a lot more powerful applications can be built. It starts off very simple, but you can quickly layer on all the different AWS services on top of each other to get it in there. This part I did a video just because each deployment takes 2-3 minutes, as it does to deploy things in AWS. And same thing, this is just still building, this is using Terraform in the backend to do those pipelines, but you're not having to write these scripts manually. They're sort of created with best practices from the get-go. So it makes it really easy to, if you're testing an application. Now here, what I'm doing is, okay, I've created those services, got the backend stand up. Now I need to tie it to my front end. Just Amplify pull the app ID for this one. And this is kind of your first time. This only have to do it when you first tie it to a front end project. It pulls it in. And once I hit enter, this is sort of where the really magic of this happens. It'll call up the browser, but you will do validating against the admin, the Amplify UI. And when you hit that OK, it brings the credentials only tied to that app and tied to that project. So you can have multiple ones, and each one is tied to its own app UI. And same here, it just adds the configurations if you need it to be TypeScript or JavaScript or any of those things. And it brings it all into the code. Generates it into a folder, so you get it checked into your repository, and it's very easy to keep track of it from there, make modifications, and you can push from the dev side to the end, all in code once you've done that first step of using the Amplify Studio, Admin UI, to create that connection and those validation keys. That way, you can have as many developers as you want, and they don't need to have access to your AWS instance at all. And they can still do their work. They can still expand into the services that you have provisioned for that app. As you can see here, everything is in there in code. You have the backend. You can add functions, and they just keep getting added as folders. See, authentication is all built there, API, all your models, thing in there. Now, for the front end, I know this is not going to be as relevant, but it generates the models, generates all the data models. It makes it easy to consume, and at the same way, I can create, if I need to add GraphQL, it also has a way to create all those starting queries from you, kind of automatically generated, so you have all your list, your queries, your mutations, and even subscription, which is, if you've ever done a stand-up GraphQL, it can be a very hard thing to do to have that real-time back and forth. It generates that for you from the front end. So code generate and add to it, creates a new folder. Here it's asking you what language you wanted to do it in, where do you want to save the files, and how deep in layers you want to go. So if you have a really complex schema where you need those generated calls to pull in 3 levels of relationships in, it can generate those for you. But same thing, what this is doing, this is just creating a YAML file that can later be modified. And here, as you can see here, GraphQL YAML, and this is the depth. So you want to change it later. Nothing that you do, you're stuck with it. You can always keep modifying and amplifying it back and forth, and it's very dynamic in the way that it responds. And it creates all those for you that you can pull, or if you need something smaller, you can still create those queries yourself as you need to. It is completely open. Now, this thing, the video you saw, kind of what I set up, I want to go ahead through it a little bit more and touch on some things that really makes it expandable. If you want to follow along, I have deployed just to the simplified projects in my website or the GitHub. You can get through it from either one of those places. So this is the application. It's just a simple, you add to the to-do list, you can create it, and it saves it after the database. So just as an example, for example, be the presentation, and this was completed. It was added. Of course, now it doesn't. There we go. Sorry, but now as we're just going back through here, this is what it will look up as you have multiple apps deployed. I made these, so these are 2 apps. This one on the right has the backend, and I want to show you that this on the left side has the front end, and I did it that way to show that the same backend can be tied to multiple front ends that still have the deployment pipeline. And they are all just an environmental API, and they get connected that way. It takes care of, if you have your domain on Route 53, you can pull it in here. Takes care of SSL certificate, all those, and connecting it up to all the right paths. Same thing if you need to turn on password protection. So a lot of the things you need when you're standing up projects for different environments, they are taking care of them for you in here. And this is one of the cool things that a lot of things are hard to do. With that environment, you can enable previews. What this will do is it'll tie to GitHub, and when you create a pull request, it'll create a new environment. Now, it can either do, if you're working only front end, it can create a front end tied to a specific environment you've created, or you can have it create the entire stack for each pull request, and the second you're done with it and you close it, it destroys that and throws it away, which solves a lot of problems when you're doing it. Now, going back here you have the Amplify Studio, and if you had multiple environments, you would see all of them here. This is what the studio looks like. Up here, you would have the different environments, so you can get through it. But this part has the manage. You can see the content. You know, what we posted up here, it's here, and it can be kind of looked at. This is a backend, so you don't have to create management things, tools. You kind of get them for free as you're doing it, and of course, you can always build your own as you go forward. But if you're standing up a new application and you need to test it to get it up and going quickly, same thing, your user management. You can create new users and manage, reset the passwords, things like that. All these are AWS servers. So you can go in your Cognito pool and take a look at it and manage stuff here, make changes in there, and it generates. But it's driven from that. File browser, if you added S3 buckets, you can compare here. So I haven't activated it, but like for example, storage. You can create buckets, or you can tie into existing buckets if you have them, and also configure permissions. So those things that are a lot of configurations when you're creating an S3 bucket and you want to make sure only your app Cognito users can look at stuff, can pull out things. This is just one thing, and those files all those permissions get configured into code. And you can either modify them here or modify them from the code in that repo. A single repo that has all your front end and back end. Same thing, Lambda functions and all those things. You can authentication, you can come back and add other factors, add other login mechanisms. And you just put in the API keys that you need from Apple or Google, and you get it up and going. For the front end, this is Amplify UI. I think this is a little bit outside conference, just wanted to touch it up. This is the front end tools. So if you need that login tools that has all that all of that logic for sign up and creations, they have all those in almost every language that you need, your Flutter, your Vue. You just bring it in, put in that component. You can modify it to match your style, but suddenly it's done, and it's done well. It's done with the right way that it's supposed to do it to prevent security breaches or that. I think those are the things I wanted to talk about. Future, this project is, the whole group is very responsive. They have Discord. The Amplify team holds office hours every Thursday, so if you're working on something, you stumble, they're very responsive on their Discord, but you can ask the team developing it almost every Thursday, which made it a lot, really good when I was trying to solve problems and approaching sort of the edges as they keep evolving things. It really did that conversation. This one ties your design files to Amplify, so designers can work with live data and that sort of thing, but I know this is not necessarily DevOps. I just wanted to bring it up as one of the features that it does have. Now, looking a little bit more into the code, one of the tools that they do have that is really cool is that they have your GraphQL. Same here. I'm just querying the pre-generated list of to-dos that pulls in all the data I need. But they also have this concept of Datastore. Datastore from a web application, it takes care of sort of your offline syncing. They created a layer where you are querying everything from your local, you're saving to your local database in the browser, and they will take care of syncing it back up into the cloud. So you can do offline applications with almost no effort. Subscription, all those things. So as you can see, it's almost, the exact same data is coming back. You can switch back and forth. You can mix and match. And it works right away. So it makes development, and you can start off with one of them, and when you hit the limit of that, you can switch to the other one because they have different fields, and you're not losing any work. And as I mentioned here, Amplify the backend. Here I have all my APIs. These are the ones that get auto-generated, but same thing, if you need to go a little bit further, you can create your own custom resolvers in AppSync. If you need to have some data coming in through the GraphQL API that needs to go through a Lambda function, and needs to do some work before you save it to your DynamoDB. You can just add it here, and it's just code. And when it gets pushed, it gets saved. And all of this is more or less building, I believe it's, Terraform scripts. They've also added the functionality to tie into the AWS CDK if you're some services that they haven't done the bridge to, so you can expand it without exporting it. If you really do get to the end and you can, as much as Amplify can support you, they have an export functionality which will export all the Terraform code, and then you can manage it completely off the Amplify platform. So that's one of the things that really attracted me to it, is you are not locked into their way of doing things, but you can kind of keep building layers and expanding upon it, but it makes that startup and creation really easy and really simple from the get-go. And one last trick that I really saw in here, and it solved our cases where we were doing a project in our company's AWS instance, but when essentially it was going to go production, it was going to go in our client company's AWS, which meant that everything we do, we needed to stand up on their AWS. Now, that is really simple, because everything that's tied to your unique one is tied in this one file, the team provider. If I delete this file and just give them the whole code, when they do amplify init on this in this folder, it will create and bring in the values from their own instance. So the GitHub that you have here is this project, essentially with this one file missing. So if you launch it in your AWS Amplify and just do an amplify init or pull it in straight from GitHub, it will just tie it up to your own thing, and it's not tied to my instance at all. Same thing in the front end. It generates, but it never saves to GitHub. And these are all the keys that, as a front end developer or an application developer, I would need to tie into AWS services. All the keys, and they get generated as they change, as they rotate. And as a developer, I don't have to worry about them, and they are just good to go. So it's sort of streamlined security, prevents bad practices from starting from the beginning, and it makes it a lot easier to scale up, to bring up and tear down code or applications very easily without having leftover things. Same thing, when you delete it, it'll delete all the instances, dump that data, and you're not having CRUD build up on your AWS instance. And so that's essentially it. If you have any questions, I believe I covered everything I wanted to. I think I'm still in time, so a few minutes. See if anybody has any questions or anything that I may have not covered as thoroughly. Nope. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.